Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about butt wink, or in more fancy scientific terms, posterior pelvic tilt, and how it relates to the squat and why it might be an issue for you. Most of you guys have a good idea of what butt wink is, most likely, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll give you a simple explanation. What essentially happens is that if my hand represents our hip joint, and as we're going down in the squat and we hit about parallel or slightly below parallel, for a lot of people the hips will start to curl under. Some people it happens to a large degree and there's lots of curling going on. In some people it happens very little and it's very slight, not a big deal. Everybody's different, but in general, I always recommend that people try and reduce that as much as they can over time, simply because there's a potential for increased back injury. It's not something that you need to be scared of or freak out about. The spine is meant to bend and move, but what can potentially happen is with enough repetitions and enough weight over enough time, we can possibly develop some disc issues if our spine is continually bending and flexing under load. An easy way to think of it is like a coat hanger. It's very sturdy, very rigid, but if we go like this and twist it enough times, it can possibly be compromised. So what happens is as our hips curl under, our spine is attached to the hips, and so our spine goes from either a neutral, more flat position or an arched position, and it goes into flexion. So our spine, as our hips curl under, is being bent quite a bit, and it's going through a lot of flexion. And like I said, this is not something that you have to freak out about. Your back's probably not going to explode, and there are lots of people who lift very heavy weights that have a good amount of butt wink, and they, at least from what I've seen, don't seem to have any problems. But just as a general rule for the average guy or girl out there who's lifting, I would say just play it safe and try and reduce it as much as possible. Something that's very important to remember is that everybody has different anatomy and everybody's hip structure is going to be different. Some people's hips are going to be built in a way that they can squat with their butt almost touching the ground, and there's going to be very little to no butt wink going on at all, and their lower back's going to be very flat. Some people are going to get to parallel, and there's going to be a ton of rounding already. And that, to some extent, is possibly because of hip structure, which there's nothing we can do about. The hips you have are the hips you got, and we can't change that. But I think for most people, they can, if not get rid of butt wink entirely, they can at least reduce the amount of butt wink they have significantly and possibly keep their spine a little bit safer. So if you do go through all these different techniques and you feel like you've done these for a long time consistently and you're still noticing a little bit of butt wink, it's possibly just because of your anatomy. And so that's something that's important to keep in mind. The first thing I want to go over is mobility. Mobility drills and things like that can help you reduce the amount of butt wink that you have in your squat. But I don't want to get into those now because there's so many different drills available that you can try that I think will work. I want to get into two very simple things that you can do that have helped a lot of my clients out, and they're a little bit easier to practice than these fancy mobility drills, in my opinion. The first one is focus on not relaxing in the bottom of the squat. What happens is when you get into the bottom of the squat and you reach parallel or below parallel, you get to the point where it's the most mobility demanding part of the squat, which is the bottom. And what happens is a lot of people relax the hips in the lower back in order to go lower into the squat. So they get to a certain point where they feel like they don't have the mobility to go further, so the lower back and the hips relax. And that is when the curling happens. So what you can do is during your warm-up sets, as you're trying to work up to a working weight or do your top set or whatever it may be, work on maintaining a tight lower back and, keeping your hips where they are throughout the entire lift, so that as you go into the bottom, you're not relaxing your hips and getting that butt wink. You're maintaining a flat, tight lower back the entire time. And as you do that, the first couple of times you try that, it's going to be difficult because it's going to require more mobility from your hips. But what's going to happen is as you work on keeping that rigidity in the lower back and the hips and maintaining a position and not relaxing and allowing your hips to curl under, your body is going to become a little bit more mobile each time as you go down and stretch into that position. So even though you're just going through the squat pattern, it is in and of itself a mobility drill. And each time you're going to be able to do it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So just consciously making the decision to not relax your hips and lower back in the bottom of the squat has helped out a lot of people in my experience. The second thing is bracing. What I see a lot of people do is they get up to the bar and they set up like this and they go, and they take a big breath into their chest and into their shoulders. What we want to do is we want to breathe down into our stomach. You want to imagine like you're filling up a pitcher with water. You're filling up your stomach with oxygen. Obviously, we don't breathe into our stomach, but it's a good cue to help you get the sensation. If you take a big breath into your stomach as you're bracing for the squat, what that's going to do is create a tighter pocket up against your back so that when you go down into the bottom, there's more keeping your spine stabilized as you hit the bottom. So if you're loose in your core and in your abdomen, there's going to be more likelihood that there's going to be some flexion going on. But if you take that big breath into your stomach and not into your shoulders, there's going to be more to support your spine and help keep it flat. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully those are some things you're going to be able to go into the gym and practice. If you like the video, go ahead and give it a like. In the comment section, I would love to hear some of the questions you guys have or some comments on what you think I can do to make the videos better. Until later, catch you next time.